planning meeting. It's going to be a little different. I'm going to read some instructions to start with, and then we will commence with the meeting. So in accordance with Executive Order N-29-20, the Humboldt County Planning Commission meetings will be held virtually until further notice. And I'm going to give some instruction on when we get to public participation, how it will go. So to participate in public comment period, please raise your hand when the item you'd like to comment on is being discussed. The chair will call your name to speak in the order that the hands are raised, and Zoom will prompt you to unmute your mic and begin speaking when you are finished, excuse me. When you're finished speaking, your hand will automatically be lowered and your mic will once again be muted. So that's when we get to public comment. So the first thing I would ask is for the secretary to do the commissioner's president. And we'll do, I did out of order, but we'll do flag salute next.
Okay, Commissioner Mitchell.
Present.
Commissioner Levy.
Present.
Commissioner Newman.
I am here.
Commissioner Bongio.
Present.
Commissioner McCavour.
Ultimately, the progress of phase
Here.
2 locally will have a major impact on
Okay, and Commissioner O'Neill. Thank you.
Would you please join me in a salute to the flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I'd ask that the director make any agenda modifications or anything he'd like to add to the agenda.
Thanks, Chair. There is one modification we'd like to make, and that is to remove item number 10, Skyline Farms, from consent. We would like to have that be conducted as a public hearing and not on consent. We've also, before you, there are some packets of supplemental information. There is quite a bit of information on item G1, the billboard for the near Elk River. We have public comments from Nevin Friesen, Chris Macbeth, Surrender here, Ammon Dip here, Joel Melke, Amanda Rojas, Jackie Clark, Max Strockman, Elizabeth Finger, Jesse, Pedro, Brenda Peace, Stan Elcock, Melissa Carew, Christy Wrigley, and Randy Gaines. We also have a supplemental, or an additional supplemental for item G1 that includes information from Sarah Brooks, Joel Ziegler, Ellen Taylor, Christina Huff, Barbara Rich, Joff Willis, John Roberson, Alicia Adrian, Jesse Wheeler, David Beard, Rob Macbeth, Laura Zugzuda, Robert Schultz, Eugene Piricelli, Kimberly Tays, Hum 95534, Sue Roberts, Andrew Greer, Alex Stillman, Jennifer Kalt, Charles Powell, Jesse Wheeler, Julie Fulkerson, Kimberly Tays, number 2, Lynn Ryan, Mary Scott, Michelle McKeegan, Reese Hughes, Richard Saltzman, Stanley Binney, another one from Stanley Binney, Michelle Kirsty, Patrick Carr, Dave Meserve, Bruce Campbell, Tyler Schuler, excuse me. We also have a supplemental item for H1. And then we will present any additional correspondence that comes in as part of the public hearing, as part of the public hearing discussion. Thank you, Chair.
Sorry about that. My question is, do we need to make a separate action on the item that you said was taken off of consent and moved to a public hearing, or can that just automatically move over?
That automatically moves over. You don't need, just don't act on it as part of consent.
That's part of consent. Okay, very good. And one other note, when we make actions on any of the items tonight, we'll be doing a roll call vote since we're doing this electronically. So with that, I will open up public comment, and this is for any items that are not on the agenda. So anybody would like to address any item that is not on the agenda? Two raised hands. So I will acknowledge public 7. I'm not sure. I don't have that number in front of me. So
this is Kent Sawatsky for you. I wish to make comment as per usual. Sure you're used to me. Can you hear me?
Yes. Thank you, Kent.
Good. So I have verification I'm being heard. So I do really like the format in the future that we continue where the public can go ahead and call in on these things rather than me having to sit there. I mean, I'm sitting at home and my dogs are happy and I'm happy. So in the future, please allow us to participate in these meetings in the same format we are right now. It's working quite well. That's my request number 1. Number 2, I want to inform you folks, and I don't want you to feel disgruntled or anything, but my perception has always been that all these permits that you've granted over these years here, or whatever you're doing, should be revoked by the federal government because you're permitting a federal criminal activity. And now I'm going to put my taxpayers hat league on. I'm the executive director of taxpayers, and I would be bringing this to my board, basically, that we basically feel that the Measure S tax that's being collected from the permits you're issuing here is permitting a federal criminal activity. And we're going to consider whether it's relevant to move forward to ask the federal government to step in here and basically say the tax is illegal that you're taxing upon these people because you can't tax a federal criminal activity, common sense, and that also the permits that you've been issuing to accomplish that task are federally illegal. So I'm just forewarning, I'm just making a recommendation with consequences. Let it be known that I will be bringing this before the Taxpayers League Board and will be seeking legal advice as to whether to move forward and eliminate that particular tax and any permits that are related to that. So, so be it. And there's a whole bunch of people from the public who some support me on my personal opinion, some support the Taxpayers League on that opinion, and we'll see how it all plays out possibly. So it'll be interesting time. So thank you for the opportunity to comment on something that's not currently on your agenda.
Next will be speaker 3053.
Hello, Thomas Mulder here. I'm just confirming you can hear me.
Yes.
Okay. Hi, I was, number one, I want to thank you guys for getting the ability to do a Zoom meeting so that way you can meet and continue to do business that the county needs to do. I'm excited later on for an agenda item. I sat through hours and hours of debate, your guys' last in public meeting. And I'm going to say the same thing I say to Board of Supervisors, and I've been saying here, I'd love to see Ordinance 2.0 amended sooner than later to allow for 200 square feet for parcels under an acre and 500 square feet for parcels over an acre for personal use. I think it's very important for our community to be able to do that. So I encourage you to talk to the supervisors that have appointed you and hopefully get them to encourage their ad hoc cannabis committee to meet and discuss that. Thank you for my opportunity to speak.
Thank you very much. So is there anybody else that wants to speak in public comment? Seeing none, I'm going to close public comment. And we're going to move to the consent agenda. I will go through the consent agenda, and as we do at normal meetings, and we will, I'll ask if anybody wants an item pulled for public comment, and then we'll move on the consent agenda. So the first three items are the September 19th Planning Commission action summary. Does anybody have a comment on that or want it pulled? I'll take a little bit, I'll go slow because it takes some reaction time to see if anybody chimes in.
Can you hear me, Alan?
Yes, I can, Noah.
Yeah,
How you
I
doing?
noticed in going, hi. I noticed actually in going through the action summaries that the second one we have here to approve, which is from January 9th, actually, let me just pull that up to make sure I'm not crazy. That actually mentions the previous action summaries that had been approved. And one of them, the first one listed under that consent agenda, was September 19th. So I just, seems like there's an inconsistency. If that was approved in the January meeting, then we don't need to approve it again. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I'll defer to the director. What would you suggest we do in that case?
Continue all of these and let us look at them, and then we'll bring the ones back that are appropriate.
Okay, that's what we'll do. We'll bring those back at the next meeting, the three action summaries, and deal with them then. So we will take those off of the consent agenda for tonight. Good catch, Noah.
Hey.
So item number 4.
I have a comment too on that one, Alan.
Oh.
Just for staff on the March 5th action summary, there was a vote taken where they got the motioner and seconder information wrong, as well as who voted on what. And it relates, just if I'm switching screens to get the exact item number, so bear with me, please. But it says that I seconded and voted to approve this project, and I believe it was Commissioner Newman that actually did that. It was for, oh goodness, the item 6 on the action summary, Rocky Costa. I definitely voted nay on that, and I definitely didn't second that. And I believe it was Commissioner Newman.
I'm trying to find it here, Brian. Item 6.
So on the action summary, it's the item
Okay.
for the public workshop.
Just to jog my memory, Brian, was that was the one at the end of Warren Creek Road near Blue Lake, correct?
That's correct. Warren Creek Road and Blue Lake.
Where we heard from all the neighbors who said they didn't like it. Yeah.
That'd be the one.
That was probably myself seconding.
Great. So they, when this comes back, they can bring it back with that correction, please.
Good catch.
Okay, I see that I have an attendee that wants to, or somebody in the audience that wants to chime in, but we will wait till we're done with the consent items, going through them, and then we'll allow to speak. So with that, I'm gonna see if anybody wants the Parkinson parcel map, item number 4, pulled from consent. I have a hand up. Okay, we're gonna have caller 7454, please.
I been unmuted, but I did not request that be pulled. I was on the prior topic when I wished to speak, so I have no problem with the Parkinson parcel map subdivision. I'm not requesting it be pulled.
So, what's okay? All right. Thank you, Ken. The next item is number 5, Derek and Jeanette Ford parcel map subdivision extension. Anybody that would like to speak on this? Seeing none, I'll move on to item number 6 and leave that on consent. Item number 6 is the Hooven Trust zone reclassification. Anybody want to speak on this item? Seeing none, we'll leave that on consent. Item number 7, Sunny Slope Ranch LLC conditional use permit. Anybody want this discussed? Seeing none, we'll leave that on consent. Item number 8, Redwood Rural Health Center general plan amendment and zone reclassification. Anybody have comments? Any commissioners have comments? Seeing none, that'll be on consent. Item number 9, Benbow Valley Farms conditional use permit and special permit. Anybody care to have this pulled? Seeing none, we will leave that on consent. And item number 10 has already been pulled from consent and moved to the public hearing. So with that, any comments from commissioners or anybody want to make a motion? Oh, we have public comment. I'm sorry. Oh, you're right. I was thinking that was, I'm sorry. I wrote a note because of the one that we were moving. So number 11, Lucchese lot line adjustment and zone boundary adjustment. Anybody want this discussed? Seeing none, we will leave that on consent. And that appears to be everything. Double check me because I've been known to make an error. So with that, is there any comment from commissioners, or would any commissioners like to make a motion to approve consent?
I would move that we approve the consent calendar as just amended.
Second, Commissioner Mitchell.
We have a motion and a second. Suzanne, will you do a roll call, please?
Okay, Commissioner Mitchell,
Yes.
Commissioner Levy,
Yes.
Commissioner Newman,
Yes.
Commissioner Bongio,
Yes.
Commissioner McCavour,
Yes.
And Commissioner O'Neill.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Suzanne. It carries unanimous. Question for the director. Would you like to do the one that we pulled from consent up first, or would you like to put it at the end of the public?
Let's go ahead and do that one first. That really has one to discuss.
Okay. So with that, the first item on public comment is Skyline Farms LLC conditional use permit. I would ask for a staff report.
Hi, so I'm Keenan Hilton. I'm the staff planner for the Skyline Farms conditional use permit project. Since there really was just one issue to be discussed, if commissioners would like me to give a full presentation on the project, I certainly can, but I thought I would highlight the reason why it was pulled tonight. It was pulled for public hearing by the applicant, specifically because they would like to contest and make a request of the Planning Commission to consider an alternative to the conditions of approval that staff included. Namely, this has to do with the condition of approval on the size of the ancillary nursery. So this is the nursery that is supporting cultivation on site. It's not a commercial nursery. And they have requested that the commission, and they wrote a letter and it was included in attachment 4 of your staff report. And what the condition reads that their site plan must be amended and their plan must be amended to have 10% of the cultivation area be the size of the nursery. They are requesting that their nursery be allowed to be 22.5%. So the reasons why staff included the condition that it be lowered down to 10% in the final approval is twofold. One is has to do with the CEQA findings of baseline. So there was not a nursery of 22.5% on the site prior to 2016, and therefore it is not baseline conditions. The applicant provided, an explanation, and what they've done with their site is that they've changed some of their cultivation from full sun to light deprivation. There's a trend that staff has witnessed over time, is that as plans have sort of shifted after 2016 towards light deprivation, typically that is associated with an ask for an increase in nursery space. However, we are not able to find that the increase in nursery space that is being requested falls within CEQA baseline. So that's the first issue. The second is that this figure of 10% is what we've been requiring consistently for some time now. And so in the interest of being consistent with ourselves, internally consistent, it would make sense to require about 10%. Also, that figure is in other parts of the code, that is the threshold for when it is a significant difference that requires additional analysis versus a minor change to a site plan. So that is a summary. I know that the applicant is planning on, or would like to speak to the commission on this item. I would be happy to respond to any questions or provide further detail on the project if you would like it.
Thank you. Do any commissioners have questions for staff? Seeing none.
Can we ask questions after we've heard the comments from the applicant, please?
Sure. So I will open it up then to the applicant and the public. We have two people that have their hands up. So the first one would be 0679.
Hi, my name is Cassandra Taliaferro. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm the owner and administrative manager of Skyline Farms. I did submit a letter that hopefully everyone read. I also submitted this letter to Director Ford I don't know, probably last year sometime, when I was calculating just how much space we were going to need for our immature plants. I could read the letter or I could answer questions, but we found that 10% is just not enough space, and that 20% is a more realistic number, especially when you factor in the walkway of the greenhouse and the different sizes of pots that you have to upplant to for the final transplant. So realistically, allowing for 1 square foot per plant is what we've kind of come up with. And in addition, many farms cut their own clones and would require even more space for their moms and cuttings than that. And I read the staff report, and I can't argue with the synopsis of what Keenan, said cannabis businesses are facing. Ultimately, when the state defined mixed light and outdoor differently than Humboldt County, cultivators were put in a position of having to choose and adapt. And having to rely on outside nurseries is not only a financial burden, but acquiring what we actually ordered for genetics in the appropriate time that we ordered them and we received them it's just critical for a successful season. And not being able to apply and receive a permit that includes the necessary support infrastructure for the size and type of cultivation, it seems unfair, or it's a problem. The 2 temporary ancillary nurseries are temporary. They are hoop structures that get constructed and removed as needed. So we respectfully request an increase of nursery space for our application.
While we have her online, would it be appropriate to ask the commissioners if they'd like to? Okay. So would any commissioners like to ask any questions of the applicant? Peggy. We can't. I'm getting no volume.
I did the opposite. If I understand correctly, what your staff is saying is that she would have to undergo an additional CEQA review if she wants to increase from 10% to 20%. Is that true?
So I don't know, John, do you? I guess I would just offer that, the intent with the ordinance was to approve projects as they existed prior to 2016. And so one of the issues that we've run into with sort of some of the changes that happen on the ground and ways that people reorganize their business plan is that sometimes it doesn't look exactly as it has. Where we have been drawing that line of what we have felt comfortable considering within our CEQA baseline is this figure of about 10%. So as far as what the path forward would be, perhaps Director Ford, you could chime in.
Thank you, Mr. Hilton. I think that the question that's being asked is really 2 separate questions. One, there is a principle wrapping around what is a nursery and how big should a nursery be. Part of the struggle with that is the ordinance doesn't define how much nursery space you get. What some people have attempted to do, and we've seen this in applications like the application that came through down at Starvation Flats, is that somebody wanted to have a nursery that was equivalent to about 35% of their cultivation area. And what they would do is that they would have young and then have kind of junior plants and then they would have flowering plants, and claiming anything that's not flowering is a nursery. So at some point, from a regulatory standpoint, this undefined nursery becomes part of the cultivation area that the ordinance does regulate. And what the ordinance allows is things like clone rooms and small areas. And I will grant you that as the nature of cannabis cultivation has evolved under the legal system, it has changed. And we do see desires for increased nursery area, but in all honesty, that from a policy standpoint has not been addressed. So that is a question before the commission tonight. The second question that is related to CEQA and that Mr. Hilton identified well is that this is a request for 20,000 square feet of pre-existing cultivation. So when we talk about baseline, we talk about what was existing on the site and what was the site using in terms of water, in terms of resources, in terms of overall impacts. And so to expand the nursery, to expand the style of cultivation, demand more water, it may have other impacts that weren't evaluated as part of the original environmental document that was done to certify the ordinance. So as long as it stays at a threshold that's below the pre-existing impacts, is considered within baseline. But if it extends beyond that, that is where additional environmental analysis would be required. And part of the struggle here is that the 20,000 square feet of cultivation area under a 1.0 ordinance could not be approved on this property. So they get 20,000 square feet basically because they are pre-existing. That's where the CEQA implication comes in relative to baseline.
I just have one other question. Has there been any industry analysis of the amount of nursery space that's required to have an economically successful cannabis operation?
So we're getting feedback from some of the growers that there is a range of space that's necessary. We have met with the applicant and been through another facility that they have. It did not seem unreasonable to have more than 10%. So it's really discretionary, and it's something that we've been trying to hold a line in terms of, like, if somebody's doing cultivation, propagation from seeds or starting plants from seeds, recognizing that there's a matter of thinning, of eliminating males and things like that, that maybe more areas needed than in other circumstances. But we do not have any empirical data to say what's absolutely required.
All right. I see Noah has a hand up, so go ahead, Noah.
Thanks. Well, I mean, I do appreciate the Taliaferros bringing up this issue because I think there are a lot of ways in which our understanding of what effective cultivation looks like are evolving and will evolve. But you know, two things. I just want to say, I think the equity issues, the fairness issues are important here because we have already permitted hundreds of other applicants and held them to the standard. And I have heard from a couple of people who are, you know, I consider very knowledgeable in this industry that, you know, Cassandra has a point. The way people are growing nowadays, it may well require more than 10% of your cultivated area to produce your nursery stock. But I just want to be clear with the director or with Mr. Hilton and make sure that there's nothing that would stop an applicant who's been permitted to grow this cultivation area plus the 10% for nursery space to devote some fraction of their permitted cultivation area to a nursery, if that seems like the most effective way to make use of their allotment. Isn't that correct?
So that would be true if it was an approval for mixed light. The important distinction is that often nurseries do have lights in them. And so if your approval is just for outdoor cultivation, then you could not use a portion of that and add lights to it. If you have mixed light cultivation as what you've applied for, then certainly you could, allocate your mixed light space and stage plants however you want to within that taxed area. But but in the case where it's outdoor, there's a distance.
I mean, at least to the extent that the nurse, yeah, oh, sure.
I had a comment about that. That really only works if for mixed light on the first round. The second round, you need to have a separate space because your existing other greenhouses are full of plants. So, and the second round is when you need to have those plants ready to roll. So it's just all about timing.
Okay, I mean, I do think this raises a larger policy issue, but I would be that we should address. I mean, there's other ways in which I think need to consider possibly making tweaks to Ordinance 2.0 down the road sooner than later, I would say. But yeah, it does seem like it would be inconsistent with what we've held all the other applicants to if we made that amendment here.
Melanie's been patient waiting, so let's let her chime in. You there, Melanie?
Yeah, I'm here. So, yeah, thank you. Most of my questions were answered. So the problem here is that there are effects that have never been analyzed, not that there are additional effects within categories that have been previously analyzed, because we're talking about, separate types of growing protocols and mixed light, et cetera. So it seems to me that it's going to be difficult to just sort of multiply from what we know, because there are effects that just haven't been analyzed. So what we would have to do is look to other similar projects that had initially applied as mixed light and then had that increase and sort of try to derive from that what the additional effects might be. Having said that, I am wondering if anyone tried to do that, and if so, what the water usage difference might be. Thanks.
The water usage difference doesn't really change because the plant numbers are the same. The mixed light could potentially increase your water source, but one could argue that a full-term outdoor plant uses more water than a smaller mixed light plant. So we don't anticipate a change in our water use.
Okay.
Okay.
Mike Newman?
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on so many variables is the problem. I mean, it depends on how they're growing. Sometimes outdoor can conceivably be less depending on the type of culture. But thanks for answering the question.
All right, I'm going to move on to Mike Newman has a question.
My question is for staff. So I think Director Ford answered it adequately, but there is a little leeway. So if the applicant was requesting something smaller than what they're asking for in this, something more towards just above the 10% mark, maybe up to 15%, is that something that would be along the lines there that would be in line with what has been approved in the past?
Yes. So when there are nursery when there's a proposal for a nursery that is slightly more than 10, I mean, I guess maybe in that range of 10 to 15, something like that, we ask for an explanation of why additional nursery space is needed, and then make an assessment on whether or not we find it compelling. But it's like the 10%, it's approximately 10% is the limit that we've been enforcing.
So we may.
Please go ahead, Director.
Thank you. I was just going to say we may want to, before we get into too much dialogue, finish public comment. Right.
I agree. So I'm going to go over. We have one hand up from the public, and that is last four digits 7454. Go ahead.
Well, of course, it's me again. You know the digits. So anyway, of course, that's where I'm at. So this is the reason exactly why the greed and weed thing is an angst to me and to many people in Humboldt County. This person has a perfectly easy permit to pull, wouldn't be objected to, but they have to push the limit. They want something special because they're special. And this is a prime example of what will be brought forward in the future in the federal court process. And if this, I hate to use the term idiot, is bringing forward and asking this request, we know that 1,000 square foot there is what you can do with clones and teens. I mean, that's all you're entitled. If you're going to go ahead in here with pallets and go ahead and take these products and set it out there in full bud, and you want to get your extra 2,000 square feet, I cannot understand a better example other than greed and weed than someone coming forward with this. I strongly support you staying hard with your guidelines you have. That's what we're playing under currently until it gets upturned. But I support what staff said, not 10%, 15%, 20%. It's 10%. And anybody who knows the business knows that this is nothing more than a ploy to go ahead and grow that additional amount, if not to fruition totally, but to within 24 days of being totally ready, budded out and harvested. So strongly support you. I would take this one with prejudice and deny the permit totally based upon the fact that they're pushing the limits and trying to push everybody around. But that's just public perception out there, what's happening in the land of Humboldt County green crack. And that's my term for cannabis. So there you go. That's my input. Bye.
Okay. It looks like we have one other caller, but it is the same number. It's the applicant. So we're going to bring this back to the commission. We gave her more than what most people got time-wise. So this is going to come back to the commission now. Oh, sorry, I wasn't looking at the. Yes, Brian, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'm not sure if this is a question or a comment, but I feel confused by what they're asking for just a little bit. It seems like what they're asking for is a much larger space to grow clones for their project and their project only. And the letter that they provided states, if I'm reading this right, that they need to be able to have space for 3,700 clones. And I'm just unclear as to how they would be utilizing 3,700 clones in an outdoor growing environment of only 20,000 square feet. Am I missing something, or is there something I'm not?
If I may, so they have a good portion of their proposed cultivation is light deprivation. And so that is very frequently plants that are significantly smaller, and they only grow it for half of the season, and then they switch over and do a second round. So I think probably it's just the size of the plants is what accounts for that.
Okay. maybe we will let the applicant speak on this. Maybe she can explain Brian's question. I don't want to keep going back and forth, but Brian did ask a question and maybe she's the one that can answer that. So I'm going to let her speak on it.
Right.
Oh, there you go.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
So Keenan is absolutely right. Half of our 20,000 square feet is mixed light greenhouses. The tarps are hand pulled. There's no electricity, so the county defines that as outdoor. And the other half of the operation is full term outdoor. And I was just calling back in to say any compromise of square footage, 15%, anything above the 10% you guys are willing to give is would be appreciated. And we've been in this permit process since the beginning, and I'm just doing my due diligence to make sure what we are applying for fits our needs, and so we don't have to go back and modify the permit in the future if we want to make changes.
All right. So thank you for that input, and I'll bring it back to the commission. Anybody have any comments on this? Oh, yeah, see it. Go ahead. Looks like Melanie has a question or has a comment.
So we're in deliberation now, Alan?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. No, I sympathize with the applicant a lot, but from a CEQA point of view, and a fairness point of view, I just don't see how we can make the findings for effects that are not just multiplied, but rather completely different from the ones that were considered in the original environmental assessment. That's unfortunately all I have to say about that.
Anybody else? Mike?
I just want to add that it seems excessive to me, and I'm concerned. I want to echo what Melanie just said.
And basically that was going to be my comment as well. So with that, where's the language on approving this with the amendment, Director?
So basically, if you make the motion that's in the staff report on this, you will be approving it with the 10%.
Okay. So I'd like to make a motion to find the Planning Commission has considered the addendum to the adopted mitigated negative declaration for the commercial medical marijuana land use ordinance as described by section 15164 of state CEQA guidelines, make all the required findings for approval of the conditional use permit with the amended changes that the staff report dated May for, let's see, is there a date on this amendment here?
I believe that if you just approve it as recommended, it would be the 10%.
Okay, as recommended.
So we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Melanie seconds. Suzanne, could we have a roll call vote, please?
Right, Commissioner Mitchell,
Yes.
Commissioner Levy,
Yes.
Commissioner Newman,
Yes.
Commissioner Bongio,
Yes.
Commissioner McCavour,
Yes.
Commissioner O'Neill.
Yes.
Thank you.
Motion carries unanimous. All right. That brings us to number or letter
Alan,
D,
this is
continued public
Noah.
hearing.
Noah's got to say that.
Oh, I'm sorry, Noah. I thought we were done. I apologize.
No, it's okay.
Go ahead.
Well, we are, but it's just a logistical or technical question. And this may have been said at the beginning and I just missed it, but I know that sometimes when I'm asking to speak or gonna be take a vote, my my mute is unmuted for me, and other times it's not. And so I just wanted to be more clear on the question of whether I should unmute my own mic each time that I am about to speak, or whether that will be done for me.
I will let the director deal with that because they're doing that and I'm not controlling that.
I figured that was Joshua or John.
For the commission, and Joshua's nodding his head yes, is go ahead and the commissioners unmute your mics.
Okay, and then remute them.
Yes.
Okay, I can do that.
All right. Thanks, Noah. Sorry, I didn't see you there. I was looking at the next item. All right,
Alan, you were doing
thank you. In continued public hearings, the All Points Outdoor Incorporated special permit for reconstruction of a legal non-conforming billboard structure. And I'll take a staff report, please. Anybody? Oh, here it just came up. Be patient with us. It takes a little bit of time.
Good evening, commissioners. My name is Shafia Odin. I will be presenting the All Points Outdoor Incorporated Elk River Billboard.
Can you hold for
project.
just one moment? I'm sorry. Yeah, we're having some technical issues here that we're working out. Just give us a second.
Thank you.
We're having some problems on our end, but it looks like they're on it. Okay, go ahead, Sophia.
Good evening. I will be presenting the All Points Outdoor Incorporated Elk River Billboard project. It was continued from the February 20th hearing. The project was continued in order to address the Planning Commissioner's inquiries regarding permitting under the Outdoor Advertising Act. There are two key points that the Commission was seeking clarification on. The first was the 660-foot ODA parameter, which was intended to delineate areas where signage is subject to compliance with the Outdoor Advertising Act, not necessarily that displays cannot be within 660 feet. And that parameter is delineated from the center line of the highway. The second key point was further clarification on the status of the ODA permit and whether a new ODA permit would be required. Staff consultations with the Caltrans ODA office confirmed that the sign would not be eligible to receive a new Outdoor Advertising Act permit because it is not located within 1,000 feet of a business area. However, the billboard is considered a non-conforming advertising display, and the ODA contains provisions for recognition and protection of non-conforming signs that were lawfully erected. The outdoor advertising permit has been issued for the sign and remains valid and effective at this time. There are also provisions within the ODA for reconstruction and repair of a damaged sign, which is considered maintenance, so long as it is performed on a like-for-like basis. The sign predates the establishment of the zoning regulations, general plan, and the local coastal plan, and therefore is considered a non-conforming structure and use. There are provisions in the zoning regulations for reconstruction of a non-conforming structure that is damaged by any casualty, which include application for a special permit, which may be approved by the director, timely application, as well as making findings for the Chapter 2 zoning regulations. In order to make the findings for Chapter 2 zoning regulations, staff turned to the supplemental findings for exceptions, which the project has been found to meet the standards for due to the unusual circumstances given how long the sign has been in its current location, as well as not posing any significant adverse effects to public welfare or the environment. And staff has included conditions to restrict the sign to conform with the established standards as closely as feasible. Staff recommends conditional approval and has included recommended conditions which require the applicant to provide proof of securing agency approvals, which includes proof of an ODA permit, as well as access to the site from Caltrans, as well as permitting and permissions through the California Coastal Commission, which may include a CDP, a coastal development permit, or may meet an exception for a CDP. It also includes meeting building regulations and flood ordinance standards, and best management practices, which include no use of heavy machinery, only using hand tools, and using natural, durable woods without chemical treatment, as well as reusing as much of the original material as possible. The applicant has provided an operations plan which meets the BMPs and is proposing and anticipating being able to reuse at least half of the existing posts. There are two proposed alternatives to the staff recommendation. Alternative one is conditional approval with a specified term. The term should allow for an amortization period, which should be long enough to enable recovery of permitting and construction costs. Imposing a term limit does not entitle landowners and committees to compensation once a permit has been granted. There is a staff recommended conditional approval if the commission elects alternative one, which was supplied in supplemental 1 and is shown below. Alternative 2 would be for denial and should be selected if the commission is unable to make all the required findings. If the commission elects denial, staff requests the basis for the decision and continuation to the next hearing in order to allow staff to make the amendments to the draft resolution. Any questions?
Any questions for Sophia from the commission?
I have a question, Alan.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't have I thought I unmuted myself. So Noah, your hand was up first, so I'm gonna go in that order.
Okay, actually on second thought, I do have quite a few questions, but I will, since I suspect there's quite a few members of the public who have already commented, who will comment, I think I'll save my questions until we hear from the public.
Okay, thank you. Then Brian, please.
I wanted to know exactly about if there's statewide precedence for this type of situation, and how comfortable we feel that rebuilding a sign that is completely fallen over, that calling that maintenance is really appropriate from a legal or CEQA perspective, because it surprised me that we were using that sort of terminology for.
So I think in terms of whether or not there's statewide precedents, I can't really speak to that. I can say that both the county code and the state code, or the Outdoor Advertising Act, and the Caltrans uses to issue permits, both include provisions for non-conforming signs. This meets the requirement to allow the sign to be maintained or reconstructed in a like-for-like manner. So the policy guidance that's here provides for the reconstruction and maintenance of this sign. And that's really what the commission, or one of the considerations the commission should be looking at, is that there is the policy guidance, there is the intent to allow consideration for reconstruction of the sign.
Natalie would like to chime in.
There is case law on point from a perspective about signs that are blown over being new for the purposes of zoning regulations. I think that the ODA might have a different standard in terms of reconstruction versus maintenance than we're looking at for the zoning regs.
Is that language that you could provide to us, what the ODA considers maintenance versus new construction?
I could. I'm not in a position to do that right this second, but I'd be happy to provide you with a memo on that point.
How about Melanie? Melanie,
Thanks,
did you have a question?
Yeah, so I last time this came before us, I asked the planning department if they were going to draft some sort of policy. I thought that might have been looked into. I'm not sure if it has been. I think we kind of decided that, you know, our ordinance already says basically that if it's demolished, we're going to side with the American Planning Association that says that for all intents and purposes, this is a new application. And there's absolutely no way that we can make findings to approve an application that wants to put a billboard, in all intents and purposes, a new billboard in a wetland. It's not the right zone. And so for that reason, there's for me anyway, and you know, for a lot of people, it's just impossible to make those findings. Now, and I think that's pretty clear. But having said that, there is some case study, and if the public's interested, the AEP, the Association for Environmental Professionals in California, has a CEQA case database that you can look up, and you can enter keywords, billboard, for example. So I brought up CEQA database before. This is a little different. This is a CEQA case through not the CEQA site, but rather the AEP. And you'll find there that there was in 2016, Arthur DiGidio versus City of Santa Clarita over billboards. And basically it says that counties have the right to have their own rules. So the Outdoor Advertising Act, Section 5270, it doesn't preempt local regulation of billboards. So we do have the right to follow our own regulations here in Humboldt County. The state regulations and guidelines, which are really what they are, don't preempt that. So unfortunately though, our ordinance does kind of preclude making findings for this, because it does say that, you know, if it's demolished, it's basically a new application. There's just absolutely no way to make findings to approve a new, because it's now a new permit in that zone. And I really am sympathetic. I know that, you know, if we had the budget, it would be great if, you know, once the any updates went out, we just send a letter to everybody who owned billboards and say, hey, maybe you want to really extra maintain or do something. I don't know, because, you know, this is how it is. But that's the situation. So it seems fairly clear that we can't really make findings for this new, what is essentially a new permit to put a billboard in a zone where it's not allowed by our own ordinance, let alone state or the American Planning Association or Outdoor Advertising Act. That's it. Thanks. So my question really is, did anyone look into that, writing that up and having that as a policy that's kind of made available to billboard owners so that they know what maybe they want their maintenance schedule to be in the future? Thanks.
Go ahead, John.
So one of the things that I thought we discussed is that we can't just make policy in the context of a discussion of an application. And the commission can discuss billboards and that can be brought back at a later date. We have not done that, obviously, because we really haven't had a planning commission meeting. Excuse me. So that is something that we can bring back, but you can't just change policies in the midst of consideration of an item. And so at this point, until there is a formal policy that's adopted ultimately by the board to conduct such activities, we're not in a position to do that.
Right. Thank you very much, Director Ford. It wasn't so much that I was wanting a new policy. I was just something to, you know, that we'd be able to give to billboard owners that just outline what the current situation is, which is what I, you know, just outlined previously. But I understand we haven't met for a while. Thanks.
Mike Newman, go ahead.
So I was twofold there. It was basically to make sure we were in the question time, not comment. And then number two, Director Ford answered my question then in full. So thank you.
I agree. Let's move this to the public comment, let them speak, and then we'll have time to talk about it afterwards. So I'm going to move over to a public. Looks like we have one person that wants to speak. Would last four digits 0763 please comment?
Hello, can you hear me? This is Jeff Wills. I'm the applicant on this situation.
Yes, go ahead.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, please talk.
Okay. Well, I'm here listening to the meeting, listening to people talk about this. Basically just giving lots of my thoughts on this, been through this process a lot since November. And the staff has clearly made the determination that they can easily make the findings to allow this reconstruction. It's not a new application. It's not a new billboard. Hearing some of you guys talk about it, I wonder if you guys have even been out to the site to see it. This is not like it is a completely destroyed structure. We're going to be going out there and repairing the structure. We're not rebuilding something new. I don't see how we can find any other findings other than following what staff recommends in approving this project.
Is that it?
Staff have any questions, or commissioners have any questions for me on it?
No, doesn't appear that anybody has anything. And I'm not seeing any other public that wants to ask questions, or there's other numbers, but they don't have their hands up. So I'm assuming that means nobody else. Oh, now there is. So the next caller, please, 2122.
Yeah, hi. This is Uri Driscoll. This is my first time doing this Zoom meeting. Anyway, to me, it seems like this is a replacement and a reconstruction, and that you really are just can rule or make a decision based on existing policies, which it appears that the staff recommendation fulfills that policy, those policy guidelines. So while, you know, there may be a lot of people that don't want billboards up, it looks like this one should certainly be replaced or reconstructed, really. And it is existing facilities. So I don't know, I hear some of the angst with not having the billboards up, but man, with existing policies, it sure seems like it fits the existing policy. So if you want to change the policies, that's a whole nother story, but I don't think that's for you guys tonight. Anyway, that's about all I've got to say. I'll comment on something later in the day. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Yuri. The next attendee is number 1974. I thought, well, there was one.
Oh, I was raised. I needed to raise my hand for the next
Okay.
topic.
I showed
not
up
this topic.
Not it. All right, thank you. Sorry about that. Director, please.
So we did get 3 new emails coming in from Rick Poletsky, Chuck Ellensworth, and Shauna Carver, who all support the billboard. We got an email in from Stan Wong, who opposes the billboard.
Okay, thank you, Director. With that, we'll bring it back to the board or the commission. Anybody have any comments?
I have a comment to John Ford. So we talked about in the previous action being consistent in our decisions and being fair to other applicants. How does this application compare to other similar types of applications for sign replacement, repair, new construction? I don't know what you want to call it. Can you tell us in the past how the decisions have gone?
I'm not aware of one where we have actually worked on a replacement. Maybe Mr. Warner or Mr. Lazar could answer that. I am aware of a new billboard that was permitted for a limited duration.
Thank you. Mike Newman.
I forget I've got to use my mouse and get over and unmute myself as I'm called on. Little delay. Anyway, I'm in agreement that this is not on the agenda to change the policy, that this is a repair. And if we were to go against this, it would be taking property without due compensation. This is in order, I've seen the billboard, it's just laying over on its back. It needs to be just repaired to bring it back up so that it can be reused. And it's with all the same materials as what is outlined here. So there is a timeline on that repair then, because you cannot use any coated woods and we cannot use any metal or anything else on that. The applicant cannot do that to extend the life of this billboard. So I am in the agreement that this should be passed, and that then in the future we need to work on, at the direction of the Board of Supervisors, billboard statute.
Any other commissioners? Noah would like to comment. Go ahead, Noah.
Yeah, hi. Unfortunately, I should just note, the staff knows this because I chatted it, but I lost my audio for the crucial discussion that we were having and I only came back on when the applicant was starting to talk. So I didn't hear the questions that the other commissioners may have asked staff, nor the answers they got. At the risk of repeating some of that, can you still hear me? Sorry, I just heard a weird beep. Yeah, sorry. I'm extremely concerned by this project and opposed to it. I don't mind saying. I actually feel like this is a case where staff, and look, with all due deference to staff, I think the staff tried very, very hard and very creatively to find a way to get to yes on this project, when to do so, they had to bend over backwards, close one eye, squint the other, and stand on one leg is what it feels like to me personally. Because there's any number of policies in place that this doesn't comply with. And it's only the fact that it is a very old, pre-statutory structure that has survived this long that allows it to exist. There, under no circumstance, I think it goes without saying, under no circumstance, if this were a proposed new billboard, could it possibly be approved? And the reasons for that are 3 or 4 that the staff can articulate probably better than I can. It seems to me, if I read the staff report correctly, that it would have to be denied right now if the Coastal Commission had signed off on a general plan, which technically it has not, which means that technically the general plan that we've spent decades putting together is still not applicable legally in this location. But I don't think we have any reason to believe that that general plan will not be approved by the Coastal Commission. And if this were to come then, it would be a clear-cut no. Moreover, I think it goes without saying that the Coastal Commission is going to deny the coastal development permit. I heard Brian Mitchell, just as I was starting to lose audio, say it kind of beggars common sense to call this repair or maintenance. I mean, as I read the staff report, they may not be able to use any of the current footings without digging them out and moving them. But maybe I misunderstood. Maybe only some of them will have to be redug. It amounts, for all practical purposes, to building. Yes, I understand they're going to try to do it identical to what it was before, but it is still going to be a brand new structure with mostly brand new materials in a slightly different location, close to where it is, when where it is couldn't be permitted by Caltrans, by the county, or the Coastal Commission today. So, I mean, to give the staff credit, I think they were trying to find a way to say yes rather than be seen as the department that says no. But if, to me, in my opinion, and I'm sorry to be, so vehement about it, it goes against the spirit of all of the policies, the Humboldt Bay Plan, the General Plan, the Coastal Act, Caltrans' own rules, the ODA. I mean, it seems to violate what all of those say we want to have or are required to have. And it's only because it's kind of slipping through this neat little legacy loophole that we can even consider it. But still, to approve it, we are exercising discretion. We have to exercise our discretion and see that we can make the findings. So when I look at some of the findings we are asked to make, sorry, let me just switch to that page. Page 20, that's the staff analysis of the required findings. Oh wait, that's maybe not what I was looking for. Well, the required findings for approval. The proposed development is in conformance with the county general plan, more particularly the Humboldt Bay Area Plan. It's not. It's just that the Coastal Commission hasn't signed off on that plan yet. And that general plan includes policies, I can't cite them, which say this very issue needs to be addressed under a policy whereby we deal with these old non-conforming structures of which there's only a couple left, you know? So I think I've made my point, but those are the reasons why I think we are really stretching our interpretation of these rules to the breaking point to find this inconformance and to make the findings.
Thank you, Noah. The director would like to have comment to you.
So one of the things I'd like to just clarify, Commissioner Levy, is that the general plan was not adopted in the coastal zone. It was not by the Coastal Commission. It was not recommended for approval by the Planning Commission or adopted by the Board of Supervisors. So it was written. There's a lot of background there. There's a lot of work there. I'm not disagreeing with the intent or anything else, but just to be clear that it's not a Coastal Commission certification away from being effective.
Okay, I stand corrected, and thank you for that. But if I just may respond to that, I do think we should take into account in our decision, or at least we may take into account, so that we don't string along an application that is ultimately doomed. This will require, if we recommend approval, or if we approve it, this will require a coastal development permit from the Coastal Commission. Is that correct?
Yes.
Based on your, well.
Can I clarify that? They can exempt it. They can issue an exemption for repair and maintenance. They have not indicated to us that they're actually going to require the coastal development permit.
Okay, I guess, but this is where I would defer to the staff's far superior ability to read the tea leaves of the Coastal Commission and its policies pertaining to Humboldt Bay. Given what I understand of those policies, I find it hard to believe that the totality of the circumstances would make them inclined to exempt it. And if they don't exempt it, it would not comply with their policies as I understand them.
Well, the struggle that exists here is that we are looking at an existing structure. And so it's hard to compare this to something that's new. And so what they look at is so sorry about that. So their responsibility is to look at what's development and what type of permitting can be exempted and allowed under the context of an existing sign, existing structure that's there. It's not my understanding that this sign will result or need to have every single post removed and replaced. I understand that some will, not all of them. So this is something that may be determined by the commission to be a minor change, a minor maintenance to an existing facility that does not require a full coastal development permit requiring action by the Coastal Commission itself. I don't get to make that call. I don't know what their ultimate call is going to be, but there has been plenty of discussion on this.
Okay, I appreciate your responses to my comments.
This is Alan. I'd like to chime in on this one. I think it would have been really nice if they'd reinforced it before the wind blew it over, but that you don't always get to do that, and it's a bummer. But that billboard's been there, I believe we were told, since the late 40s. I have to believe those billboards have rights as well, and what we have, as in the last issue that we dealt with, we have what's on the books now. If we want to change it in the future, I'm all for that. I don't necessarily like or dislike billboards, but I think that the owner definitely has the right to have it there. It's been there, and he's not replacing the whole thing. I stopped and looked at it. I should disclose that. And it is going to need new, basically the legs on it that support it, but the rest of it's there. I'm going to make a comment to one of, I don't like to go back and forth, but Noah said that the staff was trying to find a way to get to yes. I disagree with that, and I'm usually not a real big supporter of staff, but I'm going to back them on this one. I mean, you look at the way that we've tried to get to yes on marijuana issues, and they're not even close to this. I mean, we have bent over backwards. We've made new sets of rules for it, and it's absolutely a joke, in my opinion, what we did with that. Some of the things on that, mostly the roads. You guys know my feelings, but to say staff went and is trying to stretch this one, I don't see that. I think they're doing with what they have now, and I'm going to be in support of the gentleman being able to repair it. But I would love to have the discussion down the road of, having a new ordinance. This isn't new. I mean, we've had people cut these things down and then they say you can't rebuild them. That's pretty ugly if you're a businessman and you just had your livelihood taken out from under you. So I see that this person has a right to do what they've been doing, and they've been doing it for a long time. So I'll leave it at that. Go ahead, Noah.
And I don't want to jump the line if somebody else was waiting to comment. I didn't actually
go ahead.
Raise my hand. Okay. Just something that I was a little bit unclear about the last time around, and I don't think I got any greater clarity here. The zoning question. Who actually owns the parcel that this billboard is placed on?
Can you answer that, John? Oh, Sophia popped up.
Yeah,
go ahead, Sophia.
For Sophia, right.
The applicant owns the parcel and then leases it out to another agency, another company.
The applicant is All Points, yeah.
Yes.
Are they local?
Yes.
I'm just trying to understand. It's a local landowner who leases it out to another billboard construction agent or maintaining. Okay. I mean, I just remain a bit puzzled by the fact that in the executive summary of the staff report, it doesn't seem to, it didn't know what the zoning was of this land. And again, I may have misunderstood it, but I thought it was sort of saying it seems like it would be public facilities or natural resources, but agricultural. I mean, agriculture exclusive is the most fitting land use based on the property's characteristics, but there's no evidence of that zoning existing in this location. And again, I apologize if you covered this already. If you did, I can withdraw the question. But if that hasn't been covered in today's presentation, I remain stuck on that point as well.
So, Sophia, would you describe the zoning on this?
Would it be helpful if I pulled the slide back up also that showed the parcel map?
Please do. Yep.
Just a moment.
Sorry for the inconvenience.
So looking at the historic zoning maps here, essentially, if you can't really zoom in on this, but it's kind of unclear as to whether there was any private lands owned between the water channel and the highway. However, the lands that are surrounding the whole area around the water channel are zoned AE on the east side of the highway. Public facilities starts on the west side of the highway.
Got
and
it.
then the natural resources section is the channel itself. If you're looking at this is the historic map, and you can kind of see the small green sliver there, which would be where that portion of the property where the billboard is located.
That actually does clarify it. And even though, so it's the highlighted section is its own parcel separate from the one to the south and obviously from the one to the north. But so I understand that on this map, if the triangular parcel to the north and the sort of funny shaped one south of the channel and south and within that block are both AE, and this little sliver is its own parcel, there probably just wasn't room to fit the letters AE on that little sliver, but it stands to reason that it is. Okay, that's acceptable. I mean, I appreciate the explanation. But given what we see on this same slide, I guess I really wanted to zoom in a little bit closer on the question of when we call this a lawful existing structure. I mean, to be clear, it was existing. That there's no dispute that it was an existing structure until it fell over, you know, but I suppose it still is existing when it falls over. What is the basis for calling it a lawful existing structure when we don't have a record of building permits, doesn't meet any of the conditions that would now be required of a lawful structure? I mean, do we know that it was ever lawful as opposed to just being sort of erected vigilante style? I'm just asking questions because I was puzzled by the repeated use of that word lawful when there's kind of no evidence of what that's grounded in that I saw.
So I think if I could, through the chair, that both Zofia and Mr. Lazar have gone to great lengths to demonstrate that this was constructed prior to there being a requirement for building permits.
Okay.
So the fact that it exists there prior to that time means that the presumption is that it was constructed in accordance with the rules that were in effect at the time, which makes it a legal structure.
Do we know that it was constructed in accordance with the rules that were in effect at that time? I mean, what does that mean? If we're saying it predated
Well, it means if there's no requirement for a building permit, then it's in compliance with the requirements that were in effect at the time.
Okay. Okay. All right. Well, thank you for answering my questions.
Any other questions for staff and Sophia while she was on there? Not. Oh, Brian's got his hand up, so let's let Brian speak.
A question in the staff report. I feel like maybe one of the findings areas was cut off because it says it's continued below, but I don't see it. It has to do with two findings that must be made in order to issue a special permit for reconstruction, and it specifically relates to the director making these findings, but I can't find where it talks about those findings. Like it doesn't address them. On the general plan consistency analysis.
The director is looking.
Commissioner, what page are you
on? I'm scrolling back to it. It has to do with the special permit for legal non-conforming reconstruction. This is page 29 of the staff report.
So it's the reference to 313-132 non-conforming structures.
That's the one.
So basically what it identifies here is the director may approve a special permit for the reconstruction of a non-conforming structure that is damaged by any casualty if application is made within 2 years after such destruction or damage, and if the director makes all the required findings in Chapter 2 of this code. So then what the finding is that the application was made in the appropriate period of time, and then it refers to the other findings that need to be made.
So there aren't specific findings that you have to make other than it otherwise conforms with the code? I'm confused by what that means, I guess.
So in all honesty, so were we, because by its very definition, the non-conforming structure doesn't have the code. So how do you say that a non-conforming structure complies with the code? What we finally determined was the appropriate course is that provided it's not inconsistent with the provisions and the policies that are in place.
I guess I'm having a hard time. What does the chapter 2 refer to? Like, is that a specific section that it's asking about?
Chapter 2 relates to the required findings for approval of any permit. And those findings are scattered throughout this findings matrix.
Thank you. I'm not sure that I'm any less confused, but thank you for walking through your
Mike Newman has a question or a comment.
I just think it goes on to page 31 is my understanding on it, with the evidence supporting the required finding. That could be a possibility there, Brian.
Well, we've had lots of discussion on it. Do we have anybody that wants to take a shot at a motion? Still have some other issues to deal with.
I just want to make it clear, Alan, before we go into voting, that I had asked legal counsel for a specific opinion on whether or not rebuilding this constituted maintenance or not. And absent having that understanding from a legal perspective, I'm not clear that I can make findings either direction at this time.
This is the second time that we'd be bringing this back if we did that. So
yeah,
I don't know.
Well, I think that Ms. Duke had her hand up.
Oh, go ahead, Natalie. I'm sorry, I wasn't paying attention.
Thank you, Chair Bongio. So to clarify, there are two different standards. A standard under state law, under the zoning code. This would be seen as erection of a new sign. Under the ODA, I did get the definition of customary maintenance, and it's a little bit long. Bear with me, I'll read it because I don't know how else to share it right now. But customary maintenance means any activity performed on a display for the purpose of actively maintaining the display and its approved physical configuration and size dimensions at the specific location approved on the application for the permit. And then it says customary maintenance includes the following activities: changing of the advertising message, adding an extension to an outside dimension of a display, the lease, sale, or transfer of the display, adding a light box. It does not include raising the height of the display, relocating all or a portion of the display, adding a backup facing to a single facing display, or increasing any dimension of the display. I mean, essentially to me, those are questions for Caltrans to make a determination on for their permit. That's not within our purview. For purposes of state law, if the commission could choose to go down the path that staff has outlined, if the commission chose to deny the permit, it wouldn't be a taking because it is considered a new permit. That's a distinction I wanted to raise. Did that answer your question, Commissioner Mitchell?
I think so. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Natalie while she's on that?
Sorry, I'm muted. Any other questions for Natalie while she's joined us? If not. Oh, okay. Noah, I see you just put your hand up.
Yeah, that was actually helpful what Ms. Duke just said. You said for the purposes of state law, this what it will take to restore this billboard would be considered to be new construction, not maintenance. Is that what I heard you say?
There are cases on point that make it new construction for purposes of a taking, although that doesn't take away the fact that it was a non-conforming structure. So there are two different issues at play. It can still go down the pathway of a non-conforming structure that was damaged by a natural event. But for takings purposes, you don't, if you decline to approve the permit, it would not be a taking. Does that distinction help?
Yeah, that helps. And also in the second part that you read, you said that, you know, what is or isn't considered maintenance. And you said that to move any, all or a portion of the display would not be considered maintenance, if I heard you correctly. I mean, I certainly understand, you know, changing the billboard, repainting it, putting lights on it, you know, maybe even adding a structural support, I guess, if it didn't impact the ground in a new place. But certainly you could do those things, but not to move all or a portion of the display. And yet it is my understanding that this cannot be and will not be replaced in the exact same location that it was. I mean, again, I'm grasping for legal straws here because you can all see how I feel about it, but I just don't see how this meets those definitions if that's what we're supposed to be thinking about.
Well, again, sorry, through the chair, I would say that that's a determination for Caltrans to make an issuance of their own permit, because those are regulating Caltrans. Those are not the regulations that we're using for our zoning permit.
Fair enough. All right.
All right. Steve Warner's been waiting to chime in, and then Steve Lazar after him. Go ahead, Steve.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to echo what Natalie had said and also point you to the definition of the Outdoor Advertising Act that makes a distinction between the maintenance definition that Natalie read through and a directive that would be issued by Caltrans and under the Outdoor Advertising Act to require that a damaged billboard that is unable to be repaired through the maintenance allowance would need to be done within a certain prescribed time frame, and that repair could include much more extensive work than would be described under maintenance. But let me read the salient point there for you. It's on page 65 of your staff report if you are looking. It says, the permittee, after being noticed by Caltrans, has until the end of a 60-day time period identified in the department's notice to repair, replace, rebuild, or re-erect in kind the damaged non-conforming display and place advertising copy. So if you get to that page of your staff report, you'll see there is an understanding that something beyond maintenance can be consistent with the act, especially for an existing structure that might fall under this grandfathered provision. It does say in kind, and that's what we're holding them to in the recommended conditions. And Steve might have some additional insight to that. He spoke with Caltrans.
Steve Lazar, please.
Thank you, through the chair. Yeah, I just wanted to say that with respect to what they would consider to be repair and maintenance, I summarized my conversation with Caltrans staff in attachment 5, and I can tell you that they did view the work that was anticipated as the type of work they would consider to be repair and maintenance. And Steve Warner is correct to point to the destroyed display provisions as well of a larger degree of maintenance or repair that can be undertaken. And then just to Commissioner Mitchell's question about the findings, I think that the findings we landed on for this particular project were the findings for exceptions. And as the director pointed out, it's somewhat paradoxical to make the findings for a non-conforming use or display or use or structure, because by its nature, it doesn't comply with the code. But the part of the code we felt like was the closest to the target for purposes of this analysis was the findings for exceptions, which are within Chapter 2 of the zoning regulations and are covered within the staff analysis, and particularly on, I think, page 30, let's say 35. 30, the supplemental findings for granting an exception are on page 33 through 34. So that was all.
Thank you, Steve. I'll bring it back to the commission. Hopefully that answered some of their questions. Anybody willing to make a step? Oh, we got Mike Newman. Please.
So I'd like to make a motion to find the project exempt from environmental review and go with staff recommendations for repair of this billboard.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? The chair will make a second. So we have a motion, a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. Suzanne, would you do a roll call, please?
Commissioner Mitchell,
No.
Commissioner Levy,
No.
Commissioner Newman,
Yes.
Commissioner Bongio,
Yes.
Commissioner McCavour,
No.
Commissioner O'Neill.
No.
The noes have it.
Sorry. One of the things that you need to do is to make a motion that passes. So in the case, if the desire is to actually take an action to deny it, well, there are two things to be done here. One is we need to record and put into the resolution the rationale for denial. And then to have a motion with a second and a positive vote to take that action. And so I think what I would ask in order to not continue this again is that if maybe one of the commissioners would be willing to give a motion of intent with the rationale for denial, that we could trail this to the end of the meeting and allow staff time to prepare a resolution for the board or the commission to adopt.
Hearing that, would anybody like to entertain a motion as the director stated to say no to this? Well, it's a yes vote, actually. You want it.
Well, it's to deny the application.
Motion to deny the application. Yeah. Mike Newman. Go ahead, Mike. Your hand is up.
Oh, that's left over from way back. Sorry.
I thought it was a new one.
No, it was to make the motion that I did.
Anybody else? So what do you do in that case?
Thing that could be done is to have somebody just make a motion and allow staff to fill in the findings within the resolution based upon the comments from Commissioner O'Neill, Commissioner Levy, Commissioner McCavour, and Commissioner Mitchell to make findings that they cannot support approval of the application to reconstruct the sign, finding that.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm sorry.
No, it's I'm just trying to put words in your mouth, actually. But
looks like Melanie has her hand up. So
yeah, go ahead.
Hi, Director Ford. So if I were to make a motion to go with alternative 2, is that not, with some reasons, is that not enough? I'm not sure I understand what you're asking for.
Well, so what's going to happen next probably is that this will be appealed. And so it's important for the Board of Supervisors to understand the Planning Commission's thinking in terms of what it is that the reasons for denial of the application are.
Well, I mean, I'm willing to motion with some reasons and go to, I think it's alternative 2, is it not, to deny the permit?
Well, it is, but we don't have findings enumerated outlining why the commission is taking that action.
Okay, and so it's just pointing out that we can't make the findings because it's non-conforming to the current zoning and goes against APA guidelines and so on and so forth. It's not enough. You would prefer to wait and
you can do anything you would like to do. If that is sufficient for you to pass on to the board, then that is fine.
Okay. How do the other commissioners feel about it?
Am I unmuted? Well, if I may, and I'm happy to let you make a motion, Melanie. And I much regret that I missed your earlier comments and questions when I lost audio, but I was looking at the required findings for approval. So this is not my motion yet. I'm just sort of looking at how one might ground it. I don't see that this proposed development is consistent with the purposes of the existing zone in which the site is located. I do not see that the proposed development, I cannot find that it conforms with all applicable standards and requirements. And in a more general way, I therefore cannot find that this proposed development will not be detrimental to the public welfare. And what is sort of behind all of those in various ways is that in order to make these findings, we have to make numerous exceptions and deal with the ways in which this application is in itself exceptional to all of our current standards.
Well, I'm happy if you'd like to make the motion and give us, if you've already put some time into it there.
Sure. I mean, I will move. So then I will frame this as a motion, but say pretty much the same thing. I move that we deny this project, at least until I will throw in there. Well, let me just leave that out of it. I move that we deny this project on the grounds that it is not consistent with the purposes of the existing zone in which it's located. I cannot make the finding that it entirely conforms with all applicable standards and requirements. And I cannot make the finding that it is not detrimental to the public welfare.
Okay, I'll second that.
So we have a motion and a second now. So once again, Suzanne, do a roll call vote.
Is there any
Commissioner Mitchell?
discussion at all on that?
I just have a comment. I plan on abstaining from this part of the motion. I feel like my thought process behind not being able to vote and make the findings for the previous motion are not encapsulated by this motion, and I was not present for the first meeting that this was discussed. So I'm going to be abstaining from this motion.
Well, yeah, I'm happy to withdraw the motion and fall back on the fact that I think we may have somewhat different, if somewhat overlapping reasons for not being able to make the findings. I mean, I was just putting something out there and it was the strongest version I could come up with, I guess. So
I'm confused about why we're even having to do this. We vote yes and no on a lot of different things for whatever reason is in each one of our own brains. And so I don't really understand why we have to do this second motion on this issue. There's a lot of issues that I don't agree with or I agree with for different reasons. And I think fine. If they want to appeal it, then they appeal it. And if they win their appeal, then fine. But we made our decisions based on what we felt today, hearing and reading what we've read and heard. And I think that's good enough.
So let me just be really clear and through the chair and say that what is required is that the commission, that there be a second and that be passed with an affirmative vote. All that the negative vote did previously was say no to that motion. It did not deny the project. The vote to vote no on the motion to approve the project. That in and of itself is not a denial. The denial requires somebody say, I move to deny the project for these reasons, that there's a second, and that there's a majority vote on that motion.
If I May. I mean, first of all, going back to I guess what Melanie was saying earlier, I just looked at the alternative 2 in the revision to the staff report. That's the first supplemental. And that one did say, if the Planning Commission elects not to approve the project, staff requests that this item be continued to the next hearing to allow sufficient time to permit amendments to the draft resolution. Have you withdrawn that suggestion?
Well, frankly, that is.
Sorry. That is the best way to do it. One of the things I'm trying to be sensitive to right now is to give the applicant a decision so that they can make business decisions in terms of what they want to do next.
Mm-hmm.
Melanie has her hand up. Go ahead, Melanie.
Oh, I was basically going to go back to the alternative 2. That's it. Thanks.
If the commissioners would prefer to continue this to the next meeting, which I believe is going to be June 4th, then we will put together a resolution reflecting what we've heard stated here and bring back the resolution where the commission can adopt that and take action to deny the permit.
I think that would be, sorry.
I'm trying to raise my hand, but
I saw you.
I think in regards to the director here with his direction, do you think staff can come up with something towards the end of the meeting here to do the denial and then go forward? Because I think you're right. It does deny the business owner time to make decisions and to go forward. We've already delayed this just because of the COVID-19 thing and having no meetings here for the past month and a half. It's really delayed this tremendously. So I would like to see, if you're going to say denial number 2, and then have staff make suggestions based on the directors that were denying the motion to begin with, to come up with some alternatives.
Steve, do you think you can put something together? Yes. So if we could trail this till maybe 8:50? No.
If the commission's agreeable, we'll trail this till the end of the meeting, 8:50-ish, and they'll come up with some wording, come back and address it. Is that okay?
Yes.
All right.
Thank you.
So with that, before we get into something new, let's take a 5-minute break. Just give everybody a chance to do what they have to do, and we'll come back. Here we are on the first issue on public comment, or not comment, excuse me. It's Humboldt County Department of Public Works Coastal Development Permit. Staff report, please.
Good evening, commissioners. This is Trevor Eslow, the assigned planner for this project. The project before you tonight is a coastal development permit for Humboldt County Department of Public Works to develop a Class 1 bike path along 0.6 miles of the Highway 255 corridor in Manila. The path will be on the west side of the highway and start near the Dean Street Pacific Avenue intersection, and then travel north to just beyond Carlson Drive. The path will facilitate pedestrians and bicyclists and will provide interpretive signs at strategic locations. The path will be 10 feet wide and paved, similar to the Humboldt Bay Trail. The trail will impact approximately 0.77 acres of wetlands. Approximately 0.92 acres of wetlands will be created on site, achieving a 1.2 to 1 replacement ratio. Let's see if I can move this along. So this is just a slide of what the trail looks like at the beginning. You'll see it kind of coming out of the intersection there, and the areas to the south or just next to the trail are where some of these wetlands will be created. Further down, similar wetland creation. And then we get to the tail end of this at Carlson Drive is where the trail is proposed to end. As lead agency, the Department of Public Works found the project exempt from CEQA pursuant to section 15301 of existing facilities. The notice of exemption can be found on page 83 of your staff report. As the director mentioned previously, you should have a few supplementals on this that were submitted. With that, I'll end my staff report and try to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions for staff from the commission? Oh, Mike, I didn't see your hand up. But
yeah, well, with the report there and then the line there, I can't find where I can raise my hand, so I'm just raising it.
Right. Okay,
like that.
Go ahead.
So there was a handwritten comment by the public and with some of our information. I think this was an addendum lately here. Yes, it was sent on 2/5. They're talking about flooding and some other right-of-way and water settlement and all of that. Is this a property owner? Has this been looked into at all?
I believe Hank Seaman spoke with that owner some time ago, so I might defer to Hank on that.
Ronald Carlson.
Good evening. This is Hank Seaman on behalf of Humboldt County Public Works, the applicant for the project. And I did meet with Mr. Carlson on February 12th and reviewed his concerns about the project. He had concerns about drainage, concerns about fencing, and concerns about his water and wastewater utilities and whether they would be shown in the plans. And so we've looked closely at the drainage for the project, and we are confident there won't be any impact on drainage to his property. And we'll be showing the water and wastewater lines on the design plans and making sure those are protected during construction. And I plan to respond to Mr. Carlson's letter and offer to meet and talk with him.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Go ahead, Noah. Noah, can you hear me?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
yeah, sorry, thanks. My only question was just, I want to make sure that I'm seeing all the material. I believe I have, at least in my folder for this item, I have the staff report and what was titled, sorry, let me just find it. Yeah, and then another one with the same application number saying public comment Carlson. Was there a second supplemental or more than one associated with this? Because I fear I'm not looking at it.
I believe there are two others submitted today that should have been included there. The Carlson one was originally in the staff report. The other two were submitted this evening.
Submitted this evening.
Or this morning, and should have been presented to you.
Let me, so that was something, if the other commissioners are familiar with the other supplementals, did you get them by email? Can you help me find that email. Oh, wait, my apologies. Yes, I did see these. I just didn't file them. Sorry, those were emailed by Suzanne at like 9:03 and 9:08. Got it. Thank you, Trevor.
I don't know. Noah, do you have more questions or is that it?
That's all. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions from the commission? If not, I'm going to go to public comment. Okay, we're going to go over to public comments, and there are 4 attendees. And the first one ends in 1974, please.
Hi, thank you. My name is Carla Osborne, and I live on Peninsula Drive on the east side of Highway 255. And my family and I have lived here for 15 years. I am also a member of the Manila CSD board. I just want to put that out there, but I'm speaking as a resident of Manila who lives on the east side of the highway and visits the beach with my dogs daily. I drive the dogs across the highway in my car because the highway and the shoulders are extremely unfriendly to pedestrians. We've been doing this for 15 years, and I'm thrilled at the idea of having a walking trail in Manila, and I hope one day it will go all the way to Arcata. I can't imagine why this would be considered a bad idea. I'm a birder, and so I'm a strong advocate for wetlands, and I know that the county's done their homework and has made sure that there'll be mitigation that will account for, any wetland loss. So I feel really comfortable about all that, and I'm extremely excited about the project, and I really hope you will approve it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is 5906.
Hello, my name is Emily Sinkhorn, and I'm a staff member of Redwood Community Action Agency, which is supporting the Peninsula Community Collaborative, or the PCC, a resident group working on improving the feeling of safety and well-being on the peninsula. And one of the 3 main focus areas of the PCC is around walking and biking safety. And so, as the previous speaker noted, there have been community members working on improving walking, biking safety in Manila for over a decade. And through extensive community conversations and surveying, we've really seen that people are concerned about walking along and across Highway 55, and it's a top concern. So the PCC has supported the Manila Trail project because it will provide some of the safe walking, biking access within the highway right-of-way that'll connect Manila neighborhoods where currently people have to walk along the busy highway shoulder. And the PCC has found that this project really seems to be a positive step to address walking, biking connectivity between key destinations in Manila. But it also is the beginning of an eventual connection of a trail between Manila and Arcata. County Public Works staff have given several updates on the trail's progress at PCC monthly community meetings, and staff have also held specific outreach meetings with community members and adjacent landowners to understand and address concerns. And the PCC has also worked with County Public Works through the RTAP cost share program to allocate its own funds to create a raised crosswalk and gravel shoulder along Peninsula Drive on the west side of the highway that will connect the southern terminus of the Manila Trail to the Manila Community Center and the Redwood Coast Montessori School. So the completion of the Manila Trail project and the PCC's project will create a safe route to the school and community center for many Manila families. So the PCC has really seen considerable support for this trail and improving walking, biking connectivity on the peninsula. So thank you very much for your consideration.
Thank you. Next speaker, please, and that's 5906.
Hello, this is Kent Sawatsky. I just had some questions on this project. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. Well, I always check because of this virtual stuff. And you know, I strongly support trails. That's the thing, and I support the concept of trails, but I think the overall cumulative effect of these need to be taken rather just little pieces and parts at a time. And so I have a question for Melanie McCavour, and the question I have is this is being put through under CEQA as an existing project, existing facility, but the facility doesn't exist. And I don't think you can find a finding, and I'll go with whatever you sell, Melanie, if you think we can find a finding that's an existing project. It's a wetland, allegedly. And there is no trail there, so it's not an existing facility. So that's one of my objections. The other thing I object to is when you have these little projects one at a time, I guess we have to do them one at a time, but it doesn't have anything to do with the prior speaker said going across 255, and it basically dumps everybody out there on both ends of this project without any mitigation, endangers the public health, safety, and welfare. So I do have concerns on these projects, and since it's not an existing, I mean, just the basis of the CEQA doesn't seem to make sense to me, but I'll just go ahead and acquiesce to Melanie on this one and ask her to weigh in and say whether she feels this is an existing facility. Just because it's an easement within Caltrans, it has no trail, it has wetlands, and this is a whole separate project. Thank you for my opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Next speaker, number 7454. Was that the same?
I just got unmuted again. Maybe you went somebody else unless you want to hear from me again.
It didn't get moved. Sorry. Number 4113.
Okay. Hi, this is Carol Vandermeer, and I'm a Manila resident, and I am a member of the MCSC Board of Directors, and I also participate with the Peninsula Community Collaborative. Yes, this is a project that is taking place within an existing facility, being 255 and the Caltrans corridor, and it's an excellent opportunity to do this project sort of jointly and collaboratively with not only Caltrans, the county, and also the Manila Community Services District's been a part of this. We've been briefed on it, and it was received very favorably. I will say that I am urging the commission to support this project and adopt the resolution to approve Public Works to go forward. I have lived in the community for 25 years, and the interest and work on trying to make non-motorized access on 255 has gone on for more than 25 years. So this is an excellent start. It's small, but it is a start. And as one of the previous speakers mentioned, this will connect to a shoulder improvement area that will allow us to connect to the community center. And so this has really been a top community priority, and I'm pleased that the county has responded to the desires of the community and what's been voiced over decades now. So thank you for the opportunity to speak, and this is a positive project, and I urge your approval.
Thank you. Next speaker would be 2122.
Yeah, hi, this is Uri Driscoll. I've got can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. It's unclear whether you've received the points that I sent in a couple of days ago, actually. Are you in receipt of those? Do you have those before you?
Yeah, we got it in the form of an email today.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure I didn't have to cover all that again. In the notice of exemption, I noticed that it also says, Trevor didn't mention it for some reason, but it does not comply, this project does not comply with the CEQA exemptions 15300.2. And that is regarding some, it is an environmentally sensitive habitat area. A wetland is that. The cumulative impacts are not really addressed. If there are to be additional trails somehow attached to this at some point in the future, those have not been even conceptually designed. There is going to be a significant impact on the environment. We are changing a type of wetland, one type of wetland, into a completely different type of wetland, and it's really not even clear how that could be done without a little bit more review. Now, I totally understand the desire for a trail. That's great. I've been a trail advocate for quite some time. I also am a big wetland advocate, and I like to see, a trail that would be appropriate to a wetland and, nature study, as they say, because having maybe a raised boardwalk, which would not have the impacts on the wetland, I think really should have been studied, rather than just fill them with gravel, create a berm, and pave them over. I think that creates some problems. And one of the other things, I was talking to one of the neighbors there that was saying that this trail is going to cut the trees in front of her bedroom window and have the trail go right underneath it. Now that's kind of a serious invasion of privacy and property value losses and all that. And so I think that a trail is a great idea, but I think this particular design does not meet the exceptions that would be, or exemptions that would fulfill the notice of exemption that was filed. So I think we really need to reconstruct this. There is no other class 1 trail attached to this. There is no parking on either end of this. So it is a standalone new facility, and no matter how you look at it. And I'd like to go back to the drawing board and have something a little more environmentally friendly and a little bit more conducive to the neighborhood and the privacy issues as well. That's all for now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Yuri. Next caller will be 2870.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. My name is Colleen Clifford. I'm a Manila resident. I've lived here for over 15 years, and I live on Orange Drive, which is right off of Peninsula. I'm calling to encourage you to vote in favor of this resolution and move it forward. I've watched this project grow and come out of great ideas from community members over a long period of time. I think it would do nothing but add, a positive spin to our community. It's a great idea for connecting all different parts of Manila, which is currently bisected by the highway. And if we can encourage walkability and connection between different parts of our neighborhoods, getting them connected, that's going to increase the health and the community spirit here in Manila, and that's something I'm really looking forward to. I think that everyone in Manila loves the type of life they have out here. But yes, walkability is an issue that has been going on for a long time. And with new up and coming things like the store, the mini golf, the school, we want to see those things connected. We want to feel like a community that can get from one end of town to the other without having to cross or walk along the highway. Currently, that's not a possibility. We have to go on the highway to get from one neighborhood of Manila to another neighborhood of Manila. So that's all I want to say. I agree with the other people speaking in favor, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is 1676.
Oh, this is Nancy Ihara, and I also am in support of the resolution. I wanted to just talk a little bit about the history of the proposed bike pedestrian trail in Manila. Manila people have coalesced around the issue of 255 for, I think, since the 70s. We're concerned about speed issues, but other issues as well. And we met, gosh, I bet 15 years ago with Caltrans, and one of the outcomes of the meeting with them, this was several meetings with, different ideas presented by Caltrans, and one of them was this bike pedestrian trail. It does several things. There's on the west side of the highway, there's a neighborhood kind of around the school family resource center, and then another neighborhood both on the west side of the highway, and another one around the district office. And there's no way to get from one to the other unless you kind of go out to the dunes, if you want to be safe. So this path will bring safety from getting to that one neighborhood to the other. I think it will, it definitely will separate bikes and pedestrians from the highway, and people speed on that highway. It's 55 miles an hour, but if I remember correctly, Caltrans says the average speed is 61 miles per hour. And I'm hoping that just the sight of that trail and people walking along there will kind of reinforce the idea for people driving through our town that this is a residential community and will slow down as they come through. I actually also am holding out a hope for something that one of the Caltrans reps said just over a year ago, that if this trail is used and he sees that people really like it, he might consider, Caltrans might consider putting a light there at Lupin, so we actually had a way to get across 255 without a real way of getting, not just running across. I want to just express my support for bike paths in general. Over 50 years ago, I observed their presence in the Netherlands, and there were so many of them. And my son presently lives in Germany, and bike riding and commuting everybody is doing it. We need to transition to a less fossil fuel economy and encourage and support bike and pedestrian path installations. I just hope you will accept this project. Thank you.
Thank you. That looks like the last phone person in, so we're going to close public comment and come back to the commission. Any questions from the commissioners? Thoughts, discussion? Got one, but I'm not showing who it is. Oh, go ahead, Mike. Oh, now I got it. Just popped up.
Okay. So my question to the staff on this is, we've seen some questions by the public about the wetlands and the situation there. Was there other alternatives considered, less, more permeable surfaces to help with the wetlands that this is going to be impacting? This also is one of the things that the other letter that I asked at the first was addressing also. He was mentioning about runoff and that sort of thing and the wetlands. So that's my question for staff right now. Was there other alternatives considered and prices for those?
I may defer to Hank on this. He was involved with this much more than I was, and with the studies going on. Hank, would you care to chime in?
Sure. So this is a collaborative project with Caltrans and the county. And the reason the county's in the lead is that back in 2014, when a funding program was available for active transportation projects, non-motorized projects, Caltrans was not eligible for that funding. So the county offered to take the lead on receiving the funds and delivering the project. Being within the Caltrans highway corridor, there's a need to follow the highway design manual, and the highway design manual specifies different standards for bicycle facilities. And so this is a class 1 bikeway, and there's really no alternative for constructing a class 1 bikeway, without creating a fill prism. I mean, you can do boardwalks or bridges for very short lengths, but it's not financially feasible to do that for 0.6 miles. So this is we really made an effort to reduce impacts. One of the things we've done recently is reduce the side slopes on the fill prism from 3 to 1 to 2.5 to 1, just to minimize some of that footprint. But that's as far as we can go within the existing standard.
I have a question. One of the callers mentioned an issue about privacy and how the trail goes real close to somebody's home. I don't know if that individual has also made any kind of comments about this issue. Has there been any attempts to mitigate that, whether it be fencing or some other method?
Yes, as we went through the design process for the alignment of the trail, we had 3 main constraints. One is trying to position it as far away from the highway as possible to enhance safety. Another consideration is trying to avoid wetlands to the extent possible. And then the third consideration is trying to have it further away from the fence line and the adjacent properties where there are homes. So those are the 3 constraints. And so we've got a meandering alignment that tries to optimize those constraints. And so there's half a dozen residences on Lock Street, which is just off of Lupin. And I met with most of them in June of 2019. And I issued a letter after that meeting. And one of the things that we promised to do would be to really have close oversight over the vegetation trimming to minimize the reduction of their, buffer. And then after the project is constructed, to revisit that buffer and see if there's need and opportunity to enhance the vegetation buffer to have that separation between the trail and their residences. So that has been a concern, and we're trying to address that the best we can.
Thank you. Noah, I see you have your hand up.
Thanks. Well, first of all, I just want to thank Mr. Seaman for being here to answer our questions and for the level of detail of your knowledge about this. I really like this project a lot. I think it serves a lot of important public goals, which doesn't mean that it's perfect. And while I certainly want to support it and intend to, I'm open to discussing possible ways that we might improve it or lessen the impact. So to that end, I have a couple of questions. I also just want to give credit to Mr. Driscoll, who wrote a really clear and informative letter that I thought laid out points, some of which I agree with or some of which I don't, but I thought he did raise a number of different ways of considering how this could be improved. So one question for Mr. Seaman is, Are there any sections of this trail, perhaps that traverse the most sensitive wetland sections or something, some other consideration? Are there any sections that are elevated in a more of a boardwalk or bridge type format as opposed to the, I mean, you just mentioned a moment ago that it's not feasible for a trail of this length, economically at least, and perhaps not structurally feasible to support bikes and so forth if it's entirely a boardwalk. At least that's what I took from your comments. Are there any sections though that do employ an elevated structure as opposed to the paved surface?
So the answer is yes. There are 2 locations where we have constructed small concrete boardwalks that were placed in those locations to ensure that there's good drainage connectivity from either side of the trail. So that was a consideration. So yes.
So there's a couple of places that were deemed to be the sort of most important to elevate it, as it were, rather than fill it in. And you've right, for drainage purposes.
For drainage purposes.
Yeah. I guess the other question that I have is, I mean, again, it's a good point to say that as a general principle, in my view, you know, mitigation of wetland loss by wetland creation is always a very imperfect solution, although it can be warranted. So, but the ratio of new wetlands to be created in this project, I believe, was just like 1.2 to 1. It was like, you know, 20% or 25% more than the wetland loss. I'm curious how that was arrived at. What was the basis for that? Is it feasible within the, well, is it feasible economically, locationally, or otherwise to increase that number? And finally, as regards the mitigation and the creation of new wetlands, I'm curious what our procedure will be for monitoring how those wetlands function, whether they do achieve the desired end state, whether they remain ecologically viable over a period of years.
Sure. Well, I'll address the last point first. We do have a monitoring plan for the on-site created wetlands, and that has performance criteria for vegetation and hydrology. And so we'll be monitoring over the course of those 5 years, both for establishment of vegetation and also the hydraulic conditions, being wet at least 14 days. Our target is to be wet at least 30 days a year. And that was based on piezometers that we placed to get a good estimate of where the water table is. In terms of feasibility, the answer is no. When we started this project, we defined a study area, and so we did all of our archaeological reviews, biological reviews, and other technical studies within that area, within that study area. And so the wetlands that we're creating to offset the impacts on site is really the maximum that we can do within that study area.
And how big is that study area? I mean, I guess I'm trying to understand what defined the size of that study area wherein newly created mitigation wetlands could be located.
So we started this project, so we're from Dean Pacific at the south end to Carlson at the north, and then we extended the study area further south past Dean Pacific, and we identified some upland areas that were good candidates for conversion to wetlands. And so that became the study area. If there would be a need to go off-site and acquire property or easements or take other actions to create wetlands greater than what we're proposing.
And again, I'm not saying at all that I would or we should insist on that, but was that last option explored? I mean, I understand that the area that you had site control over is sort of limited here, and you're limited by the topography and other factors, but you know, the wetlands complex that we're talking about, of course, is extensive and includes multiple property owners. Was there even in concept a discussion of whether we could create off-site mitigation wetlands on a willing landowner that has, you know, similar type and ecologically related wetlands already present, or the potential for that?
You know, what we're proposing is consistent with how our department does projects where there's roadside ditches, and you know, we're often in the practice of, you know, relocating roadside ditches and, you know, swales and within our right of way, and it's pretty common to do that on a one-to-one basis. If there's extraordinary circumstances, the ratio may go higher, but you know, going off-site and trying to acquire property or an easement to create wetlands is really its own project, and so that really wasn't considered or pursued for here.
Okay, well, I appreciate your answers. They were really clear. Thank you.
I see. You done, Noah? I see Mike Newman has some questions.
I just want to add in there
Go ahead, Mike.
question that Mr. Seaman was talking about with part of the questions about the trail and elevated surfaces. He mentioned concrete, but is that concrete elevated, or is it just concrete instead of asphalt?
So it's essentially like a little box culvert. And so it is.
Is it illustrated? Is it illustrated at all in any of the staff report here?
So if you look at sheet C101.
101, okay.
And if you look towards the right, there's a feature that's called boardwalk. So there's parentheses N is new, stands for new. So that's an example of a small boardwalk.
Oh, okay. That's up there at the very top left of the illustration.
Yeah, I'm looking at it sideways and it's on the right. And so that's done to equalize drainage. And then there's another example on sheet C103. And also sheet C105. So we have, looks like we have a total of 3 of those features.
So that is moreover a culvert. Is that what you're saying there? Or I'm looking at it in the wrong place, it seems to be. Any way of sharing?
On sheet C101, it does lead to a culvert. And so that's to ensure good drainage to that culvert. And then,
so it's very short. Is that
very short?
Like what, 2 feet, 3 feet?
Probably on the order of 10 feet.
10 feet. All right. Yeah, it's nothing on the order of what the Bay Trail, because it's not near a highway. Is that correct? The Eureka Bay Trail behind Blue Ox, where we have that long metal bridge.
Correct. Yeah, so that was way out in intertidal areas.
Right.
That flood for high tide.
Yeah. And it's not near the road. And that's why the constraints that we have on this particular trail, is that correct?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
the reason that you can't do something like that metal bridge that is similar, to the Eureka Bay Trail with a metal bridge over some of the wetlands, you cannot do that here. Is that correct?
We didn't explore that. I mean, number one, for economic feasibility, and number two, for having, I would presume the Caltrans would have concerns about having a fixed structure that long and large in their right of way. So it's not something that we pursued, but I think primarily for economic feasibility.
Okay, because that costs a lot more than just putting pavement on there.
Correct.
I understand the need to get people off of the road and have it separated there because safety concerns, as we know from in the past with people riding alongside the roads. All right, thank you.
I have a question for Hank since he's on there still. I was curious what the cost of the project is, one, and the second question, is there any trails plan that will connect with this to the north to Arcata and to the south to Samoa?
The construction estimate is $1.5 million, the engineer's estimate. And this project will have independent utility by connecting two neighborhoods on the west side of Manila that are currently disconnected and connecting them to, the Peninsula Drive on the west side. There's definitely a vision of connecting Manila to Arcata, but there's no specific firm plan for where that would be located. So it's really remote and speculative at this point, where connector trails would be located. That'll be a future planning process that hasn't even started.
Thank you. Looks like Brian has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just wanted to ask if I'm looking in the wrong spot. I noticed that there were comments received from the Coastal Commission on the project, but I didn't see them attached to the staff report. Am I looking in the wrong place?
I think the comments we received from the Coastal Commission were a meeting we had with them. We did not receive any written comments from them.
And have we incorporated their comments into the project, I guess is my main question.
More or less, we basically ran it by them to kind of get their understanding and assure their support of the project.
Okay, so when it says they had comments, it was really more, you discussed it with them. They didn't have any objections or comments that we didn't adapt to.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Noah, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Actually, Brian just asked half of my question because I was just looking down at the referral agency comment. The other one, though, is that was there any consultation with DFW? With Department of Fish and Wildlife, I don't see them listed there. And I'm wondering if there was any consultation, whether or not it was technically required. Trevor, we can't hear you.
Sorry, I was checking on that real quick since I saw that they weren't on the referral agency. I was going to check I think they were on the list. They just did not respond. Let me double check. Yeah, California Fish and Wildlife, they sent a referral. However, they did not respond with any comments.
Thank you.
Sorry about that. We have another question from Melanie. Go ahead, Melanie.
Thank you. Just to address a couple of the questions that were asked regarding the CEQA. It is of course unusual to have any mitigations in an exemption. So mitigations are typically what you have for example, a mitigated negative declaration, unless of course you're looking at an exemption under a previous environmental impact report or mitigated negative declaration. So in this case, it's not, you're not supposed to be using a management plan, for example, saying you have an exemption that's related to a management plan, but it is seen. And in regards to what exemption is used, I think that in this case, it could have, this class 1 C has to do with existing facilities in relation to transport, for example, but you also have class 4 H, which is for the creation of bicycle paths if on existing right-of-ways, if it doesn't cause any vehicular impact. And of course, now that we are obliged to consider vehicle miles traveled as our primary way of evaluating impacts, it would not. So my question is, why did you decide to use class 1C rather than class 4H? And maybe you could outline for the public what previous environmental assessment has been done that would support this finding of in terms of class 1C. Thanks.
Sure. So I can explain our approach to CEQA. 15301 talks about existing facilities, operation, repair, maintenance, and also alterations. And 15301C was expanded just within the last 2 years to explicitly reference addition of bicycle facilities on existing highways. And that was done really to try to facilitate these types of projects that can help reduce vehicle miles traveled and greenhouse gas emissions. And so this is standard practice for public works when we have alterations to existing highways to look at this exemption, and we felt like it met the conditions. So when we did studies in 2008, along with Caltrans, and Caltrans was doing environmental review on behalf of federal highways because there's federal funding and looking at the NEPA compliance. And so in January of 2019, they made a finding of categorical exclusion under NEPA, and Humboldt County Public Works made a finding of exemption under CEQA. And so we filed that notice of exemption in January as the lead agency.
Sorry. Any other questions for Hank? Seeing none, we need to bring this back to the commission and have some discussion about it, see if we can get anywhere with it. Any commissioners have any thoughts on where they want to go with it? Motion, maybe?
I just wanted to say, Alan, that I appreciate the staff taking so much time to walk through all our questions. And after reviewing the public feedback and hearing the answers to the question, I am prepared to support the project and would like to hear from the other commissioners, but I'm ready to make a motion whenever we get there.
I'm in support of it.
So go ahead and make a motion, Brian, since everybody seems to be on board.
Okay, one moment. I got so many. I got two computers going here, so one second.
You want me to read it, Brian?
Oh, yeah, please go ahead.
I move to find the project exempt from environmental review pursuant to Section 15301 of state CEQA guidelines, make all the required findings for approval of the coastal development permit based on evidence in the staff report, and adopt the resolution approving the County of Humboldt Department of Public Works project, subject to recommended conditions.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll call for a roll call vote. Suzanne?
Okay, Commissioner Mitchell,
Yes.
Commissioner Levy,
Yes.
Commissioner Newman,
Yes.
Commissioner Bongio,
Yes.
Commissioner McCavour,
Yes.
Commissioner O'Neill.
Yes.
Thank you.
Carries unanimous. All right, so we've got about 20 minutes left, so let's get on to the next one.
Are we going to go back to the billboards?
Would you like to do that, Director, or do you want to go on to accessory dwelling units?
Well, I am concerned. I don't think you're going to get through accessory dwelling units.
I agree.
I wouldn't start that tonight. I'd ask that be continued to the meeting of the 21st and use the remaining time to address the billboard.
Would you like a motion to that effect to move that to the?
Yes, please.
Also move.
Hold on.
We didn't advertise anything for the 21st, but we can certainly take an item that's in the last 2 hours and continue it to the 21st.
Okay, so I believe Mike made a motion to move it to the 21st.
Correct.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call, please, Suzanne.
Commissioner Mitchell,
Yes.
Commissioner Levy,
Yes.
Commissioner Newman,
Yes.
Commissioner Bongio,
Yes.
Commissioner McCavour,
Yes.
and Commissioner O'Neill. Yes. Thank you.
Motion carried. All right, so now we're gonna come back around and address the billboard.
Do you want to continue the other ones before you get there too? You've got the Humboldt Weed Collective, and that would let some of the staff that's here go too.
To the same date?
To the same, yep.
Do we have a motion to move Homestead Collective Weed Company LLC and Sun Ocean West Manufacturing?
Sun Ocean's already continued to a day.
Oh yeah, you're right. Sorry
I'll
about that.
second the motion.
Do we have a motion?
Oh, I thought you said we had a motion.
I'll
Make the
second.
Somebody. Who was the first?
I will.
Who was it?
Brian?
Brian said, okay, Brian's the first, and Melanie, I believe, was the second on that.
So just
Suzanne,
to be
roll
clear,
call.
Commissioner Mitchell,
Go ahead.
well, okay, so this is a motion to continue Homestead Collective, correct?
Correct.
We will also need to have a separate motion and vote on continuing Sun Ocean. Is that also true?
No, because that was already continued.
We already covered that. Okay. Or I just thought we were going to have to vote to continue that to a date uncertain, just to effectuate.
Shown on the face of the agenda.
It's on the agenda.
Got it. Okay.
So we have motion and a second. Suzanne, a roll call, please.
Okay, Commissioner Mitchell,
Yes.
Commissioner Levy,
Yes.
Commissioner Newman,
Yes.
Commissioner Bongio,
Yes.
Commissioner McCavour,
Yes.
Commissioner O'Neill.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. Noah, is your hand up or is that old?
Yeah. Well, it is. And I totally appreciate that we cannot cover the ADU ordinance tonight. But I just wonder whether it's now or at the very end of the meeting, if I could have a chance to ask a question about this to the director or to Michael Richardson about why what was scheduled to be a workshop was changed to being an action item. But I don't want to bring us back and get out of order, so I can defer that question till
You want
later.
to just address it or?
I'll address it.
The director's going to address it so we can save time.
Sure.
So essentially, we've been trying to move this forward. Originally, it was scheduled as a workshop, but this is, it does have some implications for our ability to provide affordable housing. And so rather than having a workshop and then scheduling a public hearing, which was our original plan, we decided to simply schedule the public hearing and just walk you through it just like we would at a workshop, but to just try to consolidate the number of meetings that we were having so that we can get this to the board and hopefully get it done in a way that allows the public to begin to take advantage of it.
Okay, I totally acknowledge that, but I guess what I would say back to you is that based on my tenure on this body, this is the kind of item that, I mean, you know, if it's perfect and nobody has any issues with it, then it's not a stretch to hear a presentation, have a discussion, and approve it. But it does have a lot of moving parts and a lot of details. And my concern was that by having the whole matter presented and voted on in one meeting, we would lose the opportunity to be able to make meaningful suggestions, to ask questions that might not have simple answers, and then have the staff come back with some adjustments that might make it a better ordinance. And yes, it's important from a timing perspective, but I think it's also important substantively that we get it right and not rush it. So that's just my view. I never got a chance to ask in our test call last week because we didn't discuss the substance of anything in that call, but that was when I learned that it was going to be made into an action item rather than a workshop, and I wanted to just express my concern about that.
Yeah. I apologize, Commissioner Lee. I did not mean to infer that we expected the commission to get through this in one meeting. I think what I was hoping is that instead of taking 4 meetings, it would take 3.
Got it. Okay, if that's the case, if you're not going to be expecting a decision on it in the same meeting when it's presented, then I have no problem whatsoever. Thank you.
Thanks.
Sure.
Thank you. So let's get back to the all points issue.
So I did get a resolution. Do you have that, Steve? Are you back in the room yet?
Yeah, I'm back.
Can you share your screen on that?
I can. Let's see here.
And just walk us through what you have presented for the.
Okay. Sorry, I got too many windows open here. I'll get okay, not that one. Okay, I think this will work. Okay. So let me get this. Can everyone see the resolution? Is that
Yes.
okay? Okay, thanks. The resolution we have here is to reflect the commission's decision to deny the application. The first few things are making note of us receiving the application, circulating it to various agencies for comment, preparing a staff report, scheduling the project for a hearing. Then in the findings of fact, we make a note that the proposed reconstruction of the sign does not conform to numerous sections of the coastal zoning regulations. The project's not consistent with current guidance from the American Planning Association concerning non-conforming signage, as mentioned by Commissioner McCavour. The commission is unable to make the finding that the reconstruction of the sign would be consistent with applicable standards. In particular, the location and nature of the sign do not allow for the required findings found in Chapter 2 to be made, and the project is not consistent with the direction found in the Humboldt Bay Area Plan, the local coastal plan applicable. The general plan has not yet been adopted for the coastal zone. However, the commission cannot make the finding that authorization of the sign reconstruction is not detrimental to public welfare, given the public comments received at hearings during the general plan update process. The general plan includes a number of policies designed to restrict the term and placement of billboards, prohibit their construction within sensitive habitat areas, compel their removal or relocation on public lands, and prompt the removal of illegal billboards. Mentioning again that it's not yet been certified, but and then this is mentioning the sections of the Humboldt Bay Area Plan that direct the preparation of a scenic route study along Highway 101 that's yet to be completed. The commission can't make the finding that the project doesn't have significant effects on environmentally sensitive habitats, as it is located within a wetland and would require some new development through the replacement of additional posts. The commission can't make the finding that there's no less environmentally damaging feasible alternative. It's unable to make all the required findings in attachment 1 of the staff report. And based on the foregoing, the commission denies the special permit requests for the project. And then a note that denial is not subject to compliance with CEQA pursuant to 15270 of the guidelines. So that's our attempt to kind of get down some of what we heard tonight.
All right, we got 10 minutes left, so let's, any questions for the staff from the commission, and then we're going to open it up to public. Seeing none, I'm going to now open it up to the public. We have 2 participants. First one is 96 play, I'll say. Go ahead. 3 minutes. Are you there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, you have 3 minutes. Make it quick.
Very quick. I am Brian Robertson. I was the one that you just motioned to the next meeting. I'm on a very time-sensitive issue, and it's the Homestead Collective. And I just want to say you're causing irreparable damage by postponing this till the next meeting. That's all I'd like to say.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
The next is 7454.
Yeah, Steve, just one thing, when they finally adopt this, it's attachment 2, which are the findings. The attachment 1 is the conditions. You know, I don't know if they do that. Can you clean that up?
Sorry.
You guys are live.
Hello, this is Ken Sawatsky. I've been unmuted. Am I to speak now?
Yes.
Thank you. I was unmuted in the middle of somebody's conversation.
Yeah.
We do have a problem here, because earlier I wished to make a point of order, and there's no way for the public to make a point of order in your process. And so you do need to recognize that during the meeting, if someone comes in and wishes to make a point of order, how do we do that under this process? So maybe that's something we need to work out for the future. Of course, my point of order was, would we be able to make comment? Appreciate being able to make comment on this. Since we've had no time to review this whatsoever, I'm asking that this particular item be tabled. We just got read something, but we've had no time to really absorb what we just got read to us. And so I feel it's inappropriate for you to make any kind of a action based upon something that the public just had read to them virtually just right now. So how can we assess this thing that's being brought forward? And it's COVID-19. So I think you have to go that extra mile to accommodate points of order and communication. And of course, the last commenter was off point, but those are all kinds of things we're willing to work with to make this work. So I'm asking that this be tabled until such time as we can assess and absorb the information that you put in here. And it's just part of having to deal with the format in which we're working, and to move forward with on this. At this time, I will make an objection, and I will stand by that. I also feel that some of the information you were giving that led to this was erroneous, if not fraudulent. The Bay Trail, it has other mitigation off-site, including Spartina removal. That was not assessed. All these things to mitigate 1-on-1 or 1.2-on-1 is ridiculous. I strongly support what Commissioner Levy was going down that particular trail there, and there's no reason why it shouldn't be a normal. And the normal is 2-to-1 or 3-to-1 as far as wetland remediation. So I wish to have your staff bring this back to you before you make this decision and show why we can't have correct, normal remediation for this project for wetlands. That's my comments. Thank you.
You want to comment, Ben? Yeah. The director would like to comment.
So I think I want to make sure that everybody understands from an order standpoint that what this resolution does is it captures the thoughts on why the Planning Commission is taking this action. This is really to encapsulate the Planning Commission's discussion tonight. It does not require further review by the public. It is really for the Planning Commission to articulate its findings.
We can agree to disagree on that, John.
I think that we're talking about two different things, though. This was in regards to the all point sign, not the trail.
Excuse me, I'm off point on that one. I would like to apologize for that one. But the standing still, as far as the objections to it not being brought forward.
Let's bring this back to the commission. We're down to about 5 minutes, guys. So does somebody want to make a stab at doing this? The all points one, the version that they came up with. And I will get it to, yeah, Brian, I don't know who was first, but Brian, I'll go with Brian.
Brian was first. Chairman. I just want to ask a question. For me, this was a very, difficult item where I tried to make the findings and I really couldn't. And this encapsulates my ideas as well as others that concerns I didn't have. I just want to make sure that it's adequately worded in a way that it doesn't imply that everyone who's supporting this motion has to agree with every one of these objections. And secondly, I would really like to refer a little bit more to the fact that we had fairly extensive public comment received, and it was, from my perspective, fairly one-sided against this special permit. And that, when I had a hard time making up my mind on certain findings, was really what helped tip me against being able to support the original motion. So if that's appropriate, I'd like to add that.
Noah, you got your hand up?
I basically support what Brian said. I was going to mention the last part about the public comment, but I think it's also very reasonable for him to request that the findings reflect that there were a variety of reasons found to not make the findings, not all of which were agreed by all parties. And yeah, that's all.
All right.
But if I may just also say, if that was Steve's work on those findings, I thought you did a really great job.
Okay. So does somebody want to make a motion?
They just started screen sharing again, and I think they might be looking for a way to just add something reflecting of Brian's comments just now. Or, yeah.
Looks like John's doing some typing, so let's give him a second and we'll go from there.
If I may, I'll also just tell you, Mr. Sawatsky, that your input, while not always something I agree with, is always illuminating to our discussion, and not just the substantive points you've made, but the process points you're making about how we need to learn from what happened in this first pilot version of this online Zoom meeting. Hopefully can be incorporated to the format and process of our future meetings.
Yes.
Does the Planning Commission want to put a statement in there that not all commissioners agree with all the findings, or can that remain unsaid?
Remain unsaid for me. But...
Can you scroll up to where it says what this list is comprising?
So it basically just identifies that the Planning Commission finds as follows. These are all the reasons collectively that the Planning Commission chose to vote to deny this permit.
You could just say whereas a majority vote of, and that would indicate that it wasn't everyone.
Or if I may suggest, because clearly it's not a unanimous vote, but you could maybe amend that last whereas to say that the Planning Commission finds one or more of the following reasons to deny the project.
Sure.
I'd really appreciate if we could include that.
But got findings in there. Is that how to get there?
That works for me.
Somebody put it in the form of a motion.
All the motion really needs to be is the Planning Commission adopts the resolution to find the project exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act and deny the special permit for the All Points outdoor advertising sign.
I'll make that motion that based on this resolution, we deny the project based on an inability to make the required findings for project approval. I didn't say it as well as John, but if that's good enough, I'll make that my motion.
I think we already denied it, didn't we? This is just the reasons why.
Didn't deny it.
We
Just
didn't?
failed the motion to pass it.
I see.
Excuse me. May I speak?
Alan's muted.
Sorry. Go ahead, Melanie.
I really want to get this over with also, but exempt from CEQA, is that necessary? Because, given that we have to consider this technically as a new permit because now it's gone and it's non-conforming, if it were to be reconstructed, it would be subject to the CEQA. And inevitably there would have to be an environmental review because it's in basically a wetland. And so I'm just wondering if we have to include that because I don't feel comfortable with that.
The resolution is citing the CEQA exemption 15270, which is projects that are denied are exempt from CEQA.
Oh, okay. That's fine. Thanks.
So we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Oh.
I think that was Melanie. I'm not sure.
I think it was Peggy.
We'll go with Peggy. So we have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Mitchell,
Yes.
Commissioner Levy,
Yes.
Commissioner Newman,
No.
Commissioner Bongio,
No.
Commissioner McCavour,
Yes.
Commissioner O'Neill.
Yes.
Thank you.
Motion carries. And with that, I believe we're going to be adjourned. Thank you for everybody chiming in.
May I just, real quick before we end it, I know we're at 9:31, but the next meeting is scheduled for a month from now. Is that correct? The first Thursday of May. Did I hear that?
Or June.
Sorry, of June. Did I hear that correctly or did I mishear that?
Well, that was when we were scheduling things for, but we just continued the ADU ordinance to May 21st.
Okay, great. That's all I wanted to make sure that we're having that meeting in 2 weeks. Yes, thank you.
Yep.
Alan, if I can just say, for a guy who doesn't spend your life in front of a computer, you did a really amazing job hosting and chairing this meeting. I mean, honestly, I couldn't have done it as well as you. So thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. I'm trying.